I'll be talking to you really about some examples of perspectives from myself and also the whole CSIRO Agriculture and Food team about the role that science will play in agribusiness in Australia into the future. I might just move that on. These are the sort of issues I'm going to be covering. I'm just going to start off with a brief introduction to how we solve problems in the current day. I think it's important to reflect on that conceptually. I'll touch on some of the megatrends and challenges. Then I'll run through some examples of studies that we've undertaken that I think show the way forward. First of all, sort of land choices into the future, some emerging genetic technologies, biological and material science interventions, and then finally at the end, digital agriculture, and then what the agribusiness ecosystem might look like. This is a slide, actually an adaptation of a slide I prepared about 15 years ago when genomics and genome sequencing was coming onto the scene, because a lot of scientists had trouble getting their head around why we would want to capture all the data of a genome when we didn't actually have a question to ask all of that information. Given that the strong sort of Karl Popper view of hypothesis and testing and discovering things. But really data is now cheap. And so you could get all the data of the whole system very easily and very quickly. And that in itself stimulates new hypothesis setting. It provides a resource which you can test hypotheses against. And now that whole paradigm has moved out of genomics and now permeates society in total. We're capturing data about everything we do. We're able to analyse that data and create new hypotheses. And that's much of the system of what's coming into agriculture. And so pretty much the future of agriculture is actually going to be, in the digital age, all about the data itself. I'll come back to that theme at the end of the talk when I'm talking about digital agriculture. Just run through a few of the megatrends that are driving agriculture and food. We've heard a little bit about those already. I'll run through them very quickly, starting at the top. Growing population, we need to increase food production. A wealthier world, we're getting a rising middle class. People want more protein, they want more diversity in their diets. As people get wealthier, they get fussier. They want basically to know where their food came from, how it was produced. They have an expectation it will be safe, but they also want to ensure that it's healthy. Those are the big sort of productive challenges. There's a lot of volatility in the system, climate change in particular, but also global socioeconomic volatility affects our ability to respond to those. And the optimists really in the science world are looking down at the transformative technologies to provide the solutions, particularly the digital technologies. In CSIRO, I ran a PhD and postdoc forum about 2 weeks ago. And I asked the PhD students and postdocs to identify their project and go and stand in a corner of the room that reflected these bubbles. And basically I asked the people in transformative technologies to sit in the middle and the people in the other areas in the corners, depending on where they worked. At the end of that, everybody walked to a corner. We had no one in the middle. And that means that people are identifying with the domain. But realistically, we actually need to be at the leading edge of those transformative technologies and connected to those domain questions in order to be able to actually make the breakthroughs. And in a CSIRO world, the formation of Data61 through the merger of NICTA and digital productivity in CSIRO has given Australia the nation's largest computational capability. And we should be harnessing that, both in CSIRO and outside of CSIRO, to actually supercharge our activities in those other areas and applications. So looking at some of those megatrends, it's not actually without challenge. First of all, if we need to produce more food, we also have to accept that productivity trends are actually slowing down. Australian agricultural productivity over the last 15 years has slowed in terms of its rate of increase. But also, if we look around the world at other production systems, yields are slowing. A particularly worrying trend here is India, the world's fastest growing population here, with actually slowing productivity of one of its major staples. So that's a challenge. I'm just going to run through this here. This is a bit of a homage to Bryan Keating, who is a fellow of the Academy and retired from CSIRO this year. Bryan's contributed a lot to Australian agriculture, but he and his team put together an analysis of or a systems analysis really of how to address the need for further food production. First about reducing demand, so minimising waste and preventing some of these features, overconsumption, optimising livestock components in diets, filling the production gap, everything from expanding the land area, expanding aquaculture, which is very important as it's not so freshwater dependent, closing yield gaps, and intensification and improved genetics. And then finally, sustaining productive capacity, for example, ensuring we manage the herbicide-resistant weed issue, which is threatening application of herbicides in the system, controlling pests and diseases, and avoiding degradation, but particularly also adapting to climate change, which is really beginning to impact on agricultural production systems. What Bryan was saying in this rainbow pie is that the Green Revolution previously was really about more inputs and some relatively simple, very important genetics. But the next revolution in meeting that production challenge is actually going to be a multi-component, very sort of systems approach, which will bring together many different approaches to optimizing food production. It doesn't appear to be a simple answer to the next 30 to 40 years challenge. Whoops. Okay, so the graph has disappeared for some reason. The graph on the left basically showed the rainfall patterns in southwestern Australia, which basically in the last 15 years, almost every year has been a below average rainfall pattern. So that agri-system is now operating in a completely different climatic environment. I apologise, the graph didn't show up. I could see it on the computer when I loaded it. On the right-hand side, so that's one challenge we're dealing with, managing climate change. And the opportunity, which we've obviously been discussing so far, is this massive rise in food imports into China, with a much more discerning and wealthier consumer present in those markets. So these represent the challenge and the opportunity that we're faced with. The consumer drivers involve these sorts of factors. People want convenient foods as they get wealthier. They want to indulge themselves, can indulge themselves more. They're more conscious of their health. And also people are looking for ethical production, and food safety has to be a given in any product. And that will actually almost destroy your license to operate any kind of falter in that factor. But health is continuing to be a dominant trend in consumers as they become wealthier. So we have to be conscious about this as we respond in our agricultural production systems. And so basically we have to apply new science as it's emerging, not only in one part of the value chain, but think about the impact of that across the whole value chain, and in fact insert our science at all the steps in the value chain. This is actually just a value chain for Barley Max, a healthier barley product, which you've probably seen on the supermarket shelves. Differentiation's built into the seed through its genetics. You can actually process this product into different food products that have new attributes. The health benefits have been clinically substantiated, and the consumer on the right, who's obviously very concerned about their intestinal health, is able to trace all of these features back through that value chain and have confidence in the product. Okay, so I'd just like to change tack now and talk about what farming might look like in the future. This is a study that we released last year, CSIRO released last year. It's a study that had taken several years to develop. It's essentially a bioeconomic analysis of the nexus of water, food, agricultural land use, energy, and ecosystem health for the continent. First time that something's been done at this level of scale. And it's really to provide policymakers and the community a view of what choices lie ahead for Australia in terms of how it's going to manage its environmental and agri-ecosystem. It was published in Nature last year. It's the first time it's been done on any country, let alone continent. I'm going to talk about some outcomes from this study that actually show what climate change mitigation might actually mean for Australian agriculture. So this paints 4 scenarios there in the table, where basically we're looking at greenhouse gas control policies, which cap, say, tons of carbon per capita or 100-year temperature change. We could do very little, which is the weak one, where we end up with a 6-degree temperature change over 100 years, which would be reasonably catastrophic. There are 2 intermediate ones with different rates of entry, where we end up with a 3-degree change, and then a very strong mitigation scenario where we have a 2-degree change, which is what people would like to achieve. It would seem likely that pricing carbon and pricing carbon sequestration through global consensus is going to be a part of managing climate change. And if that's the case, you actually reach tipping points in carbon price and opportunities for landowners and farmers to participate in that as a form of earning income, and land use will change. This model predicts the following. Basically, this is pretty much the current use of agricultural land, and this area here, this sort of grey area, is really the sort of extensive cattle productions systems in North Queensland. We don't need to go very far into mild or strong or weak before you see a lot of blue coming into these sectors and into other sectors too, of the landscape. And this is basically just carbon plantings. It means that many of our less arable land will be turned into carbon plantings because basically growers will want to make money out of what land is available to them. I don't think quite the implications of this actually got through when this report was published. The good side of this report in terms of food production, though, is that if you actually do this and you focus on arable land through these scenarios and the intensification of arable land, then production, productivity and value still rise through all of these scenarios. So rather than this being seen as a trade-off, which it often is, do we actually manage greenhouse gas emissions or do we actually promote productivity? That's not the case, and there is in fact a win-win situation through this modelling. So I think that this is an important feature because the message I'm trying to make here is that agriculture may change as we choose and make choices to make about how we're going to manage our environment. So the science that will be applied will change and needs to be more adaptable. Right, moving on to something that I know a little bit about, emerging genetic technologies. I'll just run through a few examples of things that I think are in the pipeline. They're important. Following on from the human health drivers and consumers, the cereal grain is pretty much like a health pill, and most people view it as that, particularly when it's consumed as a whole grain. And it has many components that you can actually manipulate or modify, not using genetic modification, using conventional methods that can improve its health. So Barley Max is one example of that. There's a high amylose wheat, which is the wheat equivalent of Barley Max. So it's got 10 times the fibre, 10 times the resistant starch, 10 times the fibre in its content, and that's developed by Arista. And gluten-free barley. Last month, the first true gluten-free barley was brewed under traditional German brewing techniques using gluten-free barley developed at CSIRO. We developed these in partnerships, key partnerships. GRDC is our major partner in, say, high amylose wheat, gluten-free cereals. Group Lima Grain, a key partner in high amylose wheat in the joint venture Arista. So we don't do this alone. We do this in partnership with market-facing companies like Lima Grain, Barley Max Enterprises, for example. I thought I'd just talk about one that's in the pipeline, which is a thick aileron cereal. If you look at a grain, the big hollow in the middle there is actually full of starch. There's a cell layer around that starchy endosperm which contains many of the proteins, vitamins, micronutrients present in the grain, called the aileron layer. And if we look at it here, in a section. This is a normal aileron layer. This is in rice, single cell layer here. You can actually, through non-GM methods, start making selections that actually have thick aileron layers here. So it's gone from a single cell to maybe 4 or 5 cells here, 6 or 7 cells thickness there. What that does to the whole grain analysis is increases lipids, increases micronutrients, antioxidants, fiber, vitamin content. So this is in rice, because basically rice is easy to do this manipulation. You'll have to go as black rice, because you polish it all off when, to make white rice. But I guess this is showing the way for the next step of this is to do it in wheat, which is actually made as a whole grain. And it's possible to do that using the methods that we've developed. So that was non-GM type genetics. There is still a role for GM genetics. Last year, the amount of farmed seafood that was produced in the world surpassed the amount of wild catch seafood. So aquaculture is one of our most rapidly rising sources of protein, and a huge opportunity for Australia with its size of its coastline, and also the fact that seawater can be harnessed for this. One of the issues around finfish aquaculture is that omega-3 oil levels drop in aquaculture as the fish becomes less a part of the feed content. And we can't keep on catching fish to feed to fish and farm fish. That's not sustainable. So what we've done, together with GRDC and with a company, New Seed, is to take about 8 genes from algae, insert those into canola, get that expressed in the seed, and now we have 16% of the dry weight of canola being produced as an omega-3 fatty acid. The company will decide whether that goes into aquafeed or human feed, but it actually starts to break the constraints around sustainability in growing aquaculture. And if you like these sorts of quirky facts, 1 hectare of this canola basically is about the same as 13,000 fish. Another big GM game changer, we get oils from seed and fruit at the moment. We've been able to engineer plants so that you can actually make 35% of the dry weight of a leaf into oil. And if you look at this, this actually doesn't happen. This is a Photoshop picture. If you take a section of these leaves, then you'll see these are oil droplets. These are starch droplets around the outside, and you can see oil droplets accumulating inside. This could completely change the way that we make vegetable oils. I won't go into gene editing because I think there's a session on gene editing later on in the presentation, and I'm going to run out of time. There's concern about basically the discovery of new chemicals because of tight regulations, particularly in Europe, around residues and the safety of chemical residues. There's concern around the costs of getting GM products to market. So there's a big move at the moment to go to alternative interventions, and biologicals or microbes that have particular functions, or other biological entities. I put exogenous RNAi up here as another, to sort of, so we say, short circuit the cost of getting an intervention into market. A lot of happening in the business space, market growing, lots of acquisitions happening, and lots of independent players emerging. We know that this is actually quite valuable. We have a bioactive here called Novac. It's generated by basically taking any carbon-rich farm waste, fermenting that with particular bacterial inoculations, and you can add that to feed, and you can get here 30% type stimulations in the growth of prawns. And that's now marketed through Ridley's and marketed internationally, and we think that there'll be more and more of these types of bioactive interventions occurring in agriculture, not just for disease control as it has been in the past, but actually for stimulating plant and animal function. Water is going to be a major constraint. This is an example of another technology, the intersection of material science and agricultural science. A polymer, a spray-on polymer, you spray it as a liquid, it polymerizes on the soil surface and forms a water-resistant covering, which biodegrades through the season, and therefore is an alternative to this highly polluting, non-degradable plastic sheeting. We know that from some field trials that this gives 20 to 34% increases in the productivity from water use productivity. So an alternative methodology, and the intersection of materials and manufacturing science offers many opportunities. The biggest opportunity that is starting a new era is in digital agriculture, primarily based on the ability to capture data through sensor technology. No better illustration of how sophisticated this can be from this bee, which is carrying a sensorized tracking device on its back to follow animal movement. If you can do that, then you must be able to do many, many other wonderful things in agriculture. This is the sort of ecosystem that's developing. I'll just walk you around it from the top. Proximal sensors, basically the static or flyover or drive over, the capture, basically information on, say, a crop performance, or they can be attached to an animal to monitor animal health and animal behavior, animal movement. That's providing masses of real-time data about what's going on the farm, remote sensing, cow penetrating capability in new satellites, much higher resolution, massive amounts of data being captured, and then data analytics combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning systems to analyse that data. That's a real opportunity for Australia, because I don't think we're getting as much out of that data. We're getting the obvious out of it at the moment, but there's a mine behind there. One of the biggest challenges for actually implementing this science is actually network connectivity, both on farm and getting it out of the farm. And so we will see private networks, I think, also coming in which can enable the Internet of Things on farm. Modelling, the fusion of real-time data with models, called model data fusion, all of that will play into decision and risk analysis to make farmers make decisions, and they can implement those decisions automatically through the revolution in robotics and automation. And then on the left-hand side, I've drawn out disrupted value chains. I'll come back to that again, because I think digital technology allows actually the producer of an object to communicate directly with the consumer. That's happening in many, many parts of the economy. It's not happening that much in agriculture at the moment and the agriculture and food business, but there's a huge opportunity there. So it doesn't really matter what science we do, because this is actually coming at us at the moment at a very rapid rate, being driven by private investment. There are big companies in the US, an alliance between John Deere, Monsanto, and Climate Corporation, delivering decision support systems like this into the Midwest Corn Belt. Australia is getting its act together with some alliances between companies like PA Source with grain growers, Accenture with National Farmers Federation. Basically, a large amount of private investment happening very quickly. Some of the obvious things will get done. What we have as a science challenge is to think, actually, what are the next decisions that people are going to want to make? What are the next factors people are going to want to measure? What isn't possible at the moment? Because if it's possible at the moment, these companies are already doing it and thinking about it. Just as a quick example about the trend, precision agriculture has been around for a while. This is one from viticulture. Basically, it's a Vas Felix block, where basically you can do a flyover and look at near infrared to red reflectance, gives you a bit of an estimate of fruit quality, vine quality, and you can do a yield map as you harvest. And this block was being harvested as a single unit, but then when you brought this in, you can see that if you harvest this, the higher quality at lower yield, you can put it into a much higher value supply chain. So this is crude, just splitting a block into two. Does add value. The trend is really now to take it to much higher levels of precision for a number of attributes, using techniques which basically allow you to visualize individual plants and actually sense individual plant needs. And that's the sort of level that we're going. This is actually a LiDAR laser picture of a grapevine here. And also using other flyover techniques in horticulture, you can look at individual trees. This is using sort of thermo-imaging to look at water status of almond trees. And so you know the GPS on this, you can actually go and bespoke treat each particular tree. Alan at the beginning mentioned virtual fencing and asked you to visualize it, so I've actually shown the movie here. So this is some work developed through CSIRO, commercialized through Agribusiness. Basically, the cattle are carrying a collar. It could be an ear tag as well, which basically, how do we do that? Can we get that going again? No. Oh dear. Oh, here we go. The farmer is basically on a smartphone, drawn a line, doesn't want the cattle to cross that line. You'll see as they approach it, they recoil from it. There's a strong sound, basically followed by a mild shock, and it enables, as Alan indicated, producers to really maneuver their cattle around the internal fencing of their property. You wouldn't actually want to have a fence-less property, given this technology. Okay. The food value chain is a very traditional and well-established value chain. And there's obviously applications for science to come in and optimize it. And digital technology will certainly facilitate the vertical integration that was discussed earlier. It also leads to the opportunity to what's known as disintermediated, which is where basically producers can start connecting to consumers directly. And if we want to influence consumers, there's nothing to stop anybody on this value chain actually communicating and setting up direct connections with consumers. That is what has driven the new business systems in travel, music, retail, whatever. Effectively, I don't understand why we have to accept this value chain as a static entity, and we should be analysing it and encouraging people to get in there and start disrupting it. And finally, I think it's a common point, again, with the previous speaker, we do great science in Australia. We're very highly ranked in Australia, but I think you've all seen the stats on this, that when we look at how efficient we are at converting that science excellence into applications on the ground, we actually rank pretty poorly by global standards compared to a number of peer countries there on the left-hand side. The figure there on the right-hand side is actually taken from the Netherlands, where they recognised they had a problem about a decade ago and put in government in systems which would work to link the private sector with the knowledge institutes or the research institutes and with government commitments based on very short lines of communication, high commitment, and everybody committing. And I think this is, to me, a very strong opportunity for the industry growth centres. It's almost the role for the industry growth centres if we put them in the middle of this triangle. And I think that if we can actually make that model work, then we will make these connections between consumer and production and actually be able to deliver our science into having an impact. So thank you.